Detective Pierce had never believed in second chances. In his line of work, there were no miracles, only the inevitable collapse of men who thought themselves stronger than time, stronger than guilt, stronger than the weight of their own secrets. Still, when the letter arrived sealed in black wax and addressed only to Detective Pierce, Office of Special Investigations, he allowed himself the indulgence of curiosity. The letter was written on thick parchment, its edges browned as though licked by fire. The handwriting was elegant, almost archaic, the sort of hand one expected from a monk or an archivist rather than anyone living in the year 1926. * Detective Pierce. You are hereby requested to investigate a matter of great delicacy and danger at the Ashford Asylum for the Mentally Deranged, located on the coast of Greyhaven. The superintendent has reported a series of disturbances, patients vanishing from locked cells, staff driven to violence without cause, and whispers that echo through the corridors though no lips move to form them. It is imperative that you come at once. Discretion is paramount. No one beyond yourself may be entrusted with this task. Respectfully, Dr. Elias Harrow, Superintendent *. Pierce read the letter twice before folding it neatly and tucking it into his coat. He knew of Ashford only by reputation. Built in 1851 on the cliffs overlooking the Blackwater Sea, it had once been a naval fortress. When the wars ended, the military sold it to the state, and the stone battlements were repurposed into holding cells for society's unwanted minds. The asylum was infamous even then, patients chained to damp walls, the salt air corroding their lungs, orderlies wielding clubs rather than compassion. Reform had supposedly softened its practices in the last decade, but rumors persisted, of disappearances, of screams drifting across the waves at night, of patients speaking in tongues no scholar could identify. Pierce was no stranger to darkness. He had walked through crime scenes that turned hardened men pale, spoken to killers who believed themselves prophets, and stared into eyes that held no human recognition. But something in that letter unsettled him in a way blood and bodies never had. It was the word whispers. The train to Greyhaven was nearly empty, just the conductor and 2 passengers huddled in opposite corners of the carriage. Rain streaked the windows, blurring the endless marshland beyond. Pierce lit a cigarette, watching the smoke curl like a serpent against the ceiling. The last stop was Ashford Station, little more than a wooden platform surrounded by fog. No lamps lit the place. A single carriage waited by the road, its driver hunched in a black coat, hat brim pulled low. "You Detective Pierce?" the man rasped when Pierce approached. "That's right." The driver gave a single nod and gestured toward the carriage. "Superintendent Harrow's expecting you. Best not keep him waiting. Night falls quick here." Pierce climbed in, suitcase at his side. The horse clopped steadily along the muddy road, the sound muffled by the rolling mist. The driver spoke no further, and Pierce didn't press. Silence was often its own form of communication, especially in places that thrived on secrets. The first glimpse of Ashford Asylum was a silhouette against the storm. The fortress loomed above the sea, its towers jagged as broken teeth, its walls slick with centuries of rain. Lightning flashed, and for an instant the whole structure was carved into the sky, battlements, barred windows, rusted gates. Then it was gone, swallowed once more by darkness. The gates creaked open at their approach. 2 orderlies in gray uniforms stood on either side, lanterns casting weak halos. Their faces were pale, their eyes hollow. Pierce noted the way their knuckles tightened around their batons as though afraid of what lay within rather than without. Inside, the carriage wheels clattered across cobblestones slick with seawater. The main doors groaned open to reveal a hall lit by gas lamps. The air smelled of damp stone and antiseptic. Dr. Elias Harrow awaited him at the foot of a grand staircase. He was a tall man, thin as a crow, with a mane of white hair slicked neatly back. His coat was immaculate, his shoes polished, but his eyes were red-rimmed with sleeplessness. "Detective Pierce," Harrow said, extending a hand. His grip was surprisingly strong. "Thank you for coming on such short notice." Pierce inclined his head. "Your letter was persuasive. Though I admit I'd like to hear the details from your own lips before I begin." Harrow gestured for him to follow. "You shall. But first, let me show you the asylum. You'll need to understand its peculiarities." The tour was more than a formality. It was indoctrination. Ashford was not a building so much as a labyrinth grafted onto stone. Corridors twisted without symmetry, staircases led both upward and downward into wings whose design defied logic. Cells lined the walls, their barred doors revealing faces that watched in silence. Some patients sat rocking, some muttered prayers in guttural tones, and some stared directly at Pierce as though recognizing him. "This was once a fortress," Harrow explained, his voice echoing against the stone. "When converted, certain architectural choices were retained. You may find it difficult to keep your bearings. I've been in worse," Pierce muttered, though the truth was less certain. They passed through a ward where an orderly restrained a screaming patient. The man's skin was raw, his fingernails bloody stubs. He shouted words that made no sense, syllables that clanged against the air like iron. Harrow did not pause, though his jaw tightened. At last they reached Harrow's office, a chamber lined with shelves of ledgers. A map of the asylum hung upon the wall, though its ink was faded, its corridors branching in ways Pierce had not seen on their tour. Harrow poured 2 glasses of brandy, though he himself did not drink. "Detective, what I am about to share with you is difficult. My staff has been instructed to speak to no one, not even their families. Patients vanish from locked rooms. Entire cells gone. At first, we thought it was negligence or corruption. But the truth is stranger." "Stranger how?" "They vanish," Harrow said simply, "as though swallowed whole. Locks remain intact, windows barred. No tunnels, no forced entry. One moment they are there, the next they are not." Pierce took a slow sip of brandy, letting the fire spread in his chest. "And the staff? Your letter mentioned violence." "Yes. Orderlies who have served faithfully for years suddenly turn on their fellows. One drove a scalpel into his own throat, screaming that the voices commanded him. Another attempted to strangle me in my sleep. When restrained, they speak of whispers. Whispers that burrow." Pierce's cigarette trembled slightly as he lit it. "And you believe these disturbances are connected?" "I know they are. Detective, I have spent my life cataloging disorders of the mind. But what I have seen here is not madness. It is intrusion. Something not of the patient, not of the man, but upon him." Pierce leaned forward. "You want me to prove it?" "I want you to survive it," Harrow said grimly. "Because I fear we are past the point of prevention. Something has already entered Ashford. And it feeds." That night, Pierce was given a chamber near the east wing. His bed was narrow, the mattress thin, the air heavy with mildew. Sleep did not come easily. The corridors beyond whispered faintly, no words he could make out, only the cadence of breath against stone. When at last he drifted into half-slumber, he dreamed of water. Black waves crashing against the fortress walls. Hands clawing upward from beneath the surface, pale and skeletal. A voice calling his name from the depths. He awoke with a start. The whisper was no longer in his dream. It was in the room. Pierce sat upright, pistol in hand. The lantern flickered. In the far corner of the chamber, the air rippled as though heat rose from the floor. Slowly, the shape of a man emerged, thin, contorted, his face obscured. The whisper grew louder. Pierce cocked the hammer. "Speak!" The figure tilted its head. Where a mouth should have been was only smooth skin. The whisper came from nowhere and everywhere. "Pierce." The detective's finger hovered on the trigger. "What do you want?" The whisper laughed. Not cruelly, but intimately, as though it already knew the answer. "Names. Yours. Theirs. All of them." The lantern flared and burst, plunging the chamber into darkness. When Pierce struck a match, the corner was empty. Only damp stone remained. But scrawled across the wall, gouged by unseen hands, was a single sentence. "The asylum remembers." Detective Pierce did not sleep again that night. The words carved into the wall, "The asylum remembers," pulsed in his thoughts like a second heartbeat. At dawn, when the orderlies unlocked the east wing for their rounds, Pierce was already dressed, coat buttoned, pistol holstered. He ran his fingers across the gouged stone once more. The marks were deep, carved with force. They had not been there the day before. And yet when he questioned the orderly assigned to his corridor, the man only frowned. "No writing there, sir," he muttered. "Not unless you scratched it yourself?" Pierce held his gaze until the orderly looked away. Denial was its own confession. Dr. Harrow met him in the dining hall, where the staff ate their meager breakfast before the patients were served. The air was thick with porridge steam and the tang of disinfectant. Harrow looked worse than the night before, his eyes bloodshot, his hands trembling slightly as he buttered a crust of bread he had no intention of eating. "There has been another disappearance," Harrow said without preamble. Pierce stiffened. "When?" "During the night. A patient from the North Wing, Henry Carroway. His cell was locked, the guard swears he checked hourly. At dawn, the room was empty." Pierce set down his untouched coffee. "Take me there." The North Wing smelled of salt and rust. The sea pressed close against the old fortress walls here, waves slamming the stone just beyond. Damp clung to the air, and every step echoed as though the building itself were hollow. Carroway's cell door was intact, its iron lock unbroken. Inside, the cot was neatly made, the chamber bare except for a dented tin cup and a Bible with pages missing. "Carroway was docile," Harrow said. "A former minister. His crime was only preaching too loudly in the streets, claiming visions from God. He was no danger." Pierce crouched, inspecting the cot. The blanket was cold, the sheets stiff with damp. But the Bible drew his attention. He lifted it, flipping through the torn pages. The missing leaves were not random, each one was from the Book of Job. On the final page, scrawled in uneven ink, were words not from Scripture. "He calls from the deep." Pierce's jaw tightened. "Who found this?" "The guard on duty," Harrow said. "Bring him." The guard was a young man named Fletcher, pale and sweating even in the chill corridor. He stammered as Pierce questioned him. "I swear, detective, I checked. Every hour, like always. He was there at midnight, lying in bed. When I opened at dawn, the bed was empty. No sound in the night?" Fletcher shook his head violently. "Nothing but the waves." Pierce studied him, silent long enough for the guard to squirm. "Show me your hands." The man obeyed. His palms were raw, as if he'd been clutching something rough. Across his right wrist was a faint red mark, half-circle shaped. "Chain?" Pierce asked. Fletcher flinched. "I don't know. Maybe I brushed the bars." Pierce stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You've heard them, haven't you? The whispers." Fletcher's eyes filled with tears. "I try to block them out. God help me, I try. But they know my name." The guard broke down, shaking. Harrow moved to steady him, But Pierce raised a hand. "Send him home," Pierce said flatly. "If he stays, he'll vanish like the rest." That afternoon, Pierce began his own inspection of the asylum's records. The ledgers were immaculate. Harrow was a man of order, if nothing else. Patient numbers, dates of admission, medical notes. But when Pierce traced the pages back 5 years, patterns emerged. Gaps. Names struck out without explanation. Always the same notation in the margins, removed to coastal care. Pierce tapped the page. "What does this mean?" Harrow adjusted his spectacles. "An official euphemism. Transfers, they called it. Though no receiving hospital has ever confirmed such patients arrived. Disappeared," Pierce muttered. "Yes," Harrow said. "For years. Though never at this rate." Pierce flipped further, noting the clustering. Entire months where vanishings occurred weekly. Then years of silence. And now, a sudden resurgence. The asylum was not random. It remembered. It chose. That evening, Pierce requested to interview patients directly. Harrow hesitated but relented, selecting 3 considered stable. The first was a woman named Margaret Lowe, committed after drowning her infant daughter in the river. She sat with her hands folded, eyes downcast. "Do you hear voices, Margaret?" Pierce asked. Her lips trembled. "Not voices. A voice. But it is not in the air. It is in the stone. The walls breathe when you sleep." "What does it say?" She looked up, and for the first time Pierce saw her eyes, not madness, but terror. "It asks for names. Always names. It feeds on the sound of them. That is why I do not speak my child's name anymore. If I do, it will take her again." The second patient was a sailor named Briggs, his skin tattooed with faded anchors. He grinned when Pierce entered. "You're new," Briggs said. "It already knows you." "What knows me?" "The one beneath. In the salt. It rises with the tide. Every stone hears its tooth, every wave its tongue. You'll hear it soon, detective. Everyone does." The third patient refused to speak at all. She only drew on the walls with chalk, circles within circles, always intersecting. Pierce crouched to examine one. At the center she had scrawled a single word, over and over, vessel. That night sleep did not come. Pierce sat at his desk with the Bible from Carroway's cell and the ledgers spread before him. The rain lashed the windows, wind howling against the old fortress stones. At midnight the whispers returned. Louder this time. Not from the corridor. From the very air around him. Pierce. His pistol was in his hand before the sound had finished. "Show yourself." The mirror across the room rippled. His reflection stepped forward, separating from the glass. It was him, same coat, same pistol, same tired eyes. But the reflection smiled. "Detective Pierce," it whispered. "The asylum remembers you because you belong to it. You always have." Pierce fired. The mirror shattered, shards spraying across the floor. When he looked again, the room was empty. Only his own ragged breath remained. But carved into the desk, as though by unseen nails, were 3 names. Carroway. Lowe. Pierce. In the morning, Dr. Harrow found him still awake, staring at the gouged wood. "You look unwell," Harrow said softly. Pierce holstered his pistol. "Your asylum doesn't just hold patients. It keeps them. It feeds on them. And now it knows me." Harrow's hands trembled. "Then God help us all." The storm did not break with the dawn. It only deepened. The sea rose higher against the fortress walls, its roar a constant undertone to every sound in the asylum. Lanterns flickered in the corridors, their light trembling as if the building itself breathed. Detective Pierce walked the length of the west wing, boots striking damp stone. He had asked Harrow to grant him access to every chamber, every passage seldom used. Harrow agreed reluctantly, handing him a brass ring heavy with keys. "Do not stray below the ground floor," Harrow had warned. "The sublevels are not safe. Not even for us." Pierce offered no reply. He had already decided the sublevels were precisely where he must go. The west wing had been closed for years, the paint peeling, doors chained shut. Rats scattered at the scrape of his boots. The smell of mildew was suffocating. Each locked door he opened revealed another forgotten chamber, a ward with overturned beds, a storeroom filled with rotting bandages, a hall where rusted gurneys lay like corpses. But in the final room he found something different. A chapel. The pews were warped and broken, the altar cracked down its center. Candles burned, though no one had lit them. Wax dripped fresh and hot down to the stone floor, forming small pools that hardened into shapes like teeth. Above the altar, the crucifix was inverted. Nailed across the arms were strips of parchment torn from Bibles. Each carried the same phrase in scrawled black ink. Vessel. The word struck him again, the same the silent woman had drawn in chalk. He moved closer, reaching to pull one slip free. The candle flames leapt violently, flaring so high they touched the ceiling. His shadow stretched across the ruined altar like a body hung from a noose. Pierce tore the slip away anyway. Beneath it, the wood was carved, letters gouged deep into the altar itself. "Prepare the gathering." He carried the parchment back to Harrow's office, placing it on the doctor's desk. Harrow's face strained of color as he read. "The gathering," Harrow whispered. "Dear God. I had hoped the legends were only that." "Explain." Harrow pressed trembling fingers to his temple. "Old stories. From when this place was still a garrison. The soldiers stationed here spoke of rites performed beneath the fortress. A cult, they claimed, worshipping something in the sea. They called it the Gathering of Vessels, a ritual of offering. The chosen were taken below, never to return. And you never thought to mention this?" Pierce's tone cut like steel. "I thought it superstition," Harrow snapped. "I am a man of science, detective. I do not traffic in ghost tales. But," his voice faltered, "too many vanishings. Too many signs." Pierce leaned across the desk. "Where are the sublevels?" Harrow looked away. "Sealed. Decades ago. Unsealed them." That night, lantern in hand, Pierce followed Harrow and two orderlies down a narrow stair hidden behind a false wall in the north wing. Rusted hinges screamed as Harrow forced the door open. The stairwell spiraled downward, slick with moss. The air grew colder, damper. The walls seemed to close in, pressing closer with each turn. At last they reached a great iron door crusted with salt. Carved across its surface were the same concentric circles the silent woman had drawn, hundreds of them, etched by countless hands. One orderly muttered a prayer. "Open it," Pierce ordered. They strained against the rusted wheel lock until, with a final shriek of metal, the door groaned wide. The sublevels yawned before them, a vast corridor stretching into blackness, the air thick with brine and rot. Faint whispers drifted on the draft, indistinct but urgent, as if a crowd gathered just beyond the dark. They did not venture far that night. Pierce insisted on caution, marking the walls with chalk, mapping each turn. But even within the first 100 feet they found signs, shackles bolted to the stone, still wet with rust. Bones scattered like refuse, gnawed clean, symbols carved into the floor, each circle spiraling inward until the eye lost itself. When at last they turned back, Harrow was pale and shaking. "We should reseal it. For all our sakes." Pierce shook his head. Not until I know what they're preparing. Not until I know why they've taken these people. The following day, the asylum grew restless. Patients screamed without reason, thrashing in their beds. Several attacked orderlies, biting, clawing, shrieking words in tongues no one understood. Even the staff whispered nervously, avoiding eye contact, speaking in hushed tones. Pierce saw the change as clearly as he felt it. Something was building. He returned to Margaret Lowe, the woman who had spoken of the walls breathing. She sat rocking in her cot, her hands over her ears. "They're gathering," she moaned. "They're calling the names one by one. When the list is done, the doors will open." "Whose names?" Pierce demanded. "Everyone who hears them. Everyone who listens." She looked up suddenly, eyes wide with terror. "Don't listen, detective. That is how they take you." But listening was unavoidable. That night, as Pierce walked the dark corridors alone, the whispers pressed closer than ever. Not faint, not distant. Right against his ear. Pierce. He spun, pistol raised. The corridor was empty. Detective Pierce. His chest tightened. The voice was his own. "Come below. Join the gathering." He slammed a fist against the wall, forcing the sound from his head. But when he pulled back his hand, blood smeared the stone. And in the smear, letters appeared, as if the wall itself had written them. Vessel. Sleep was impossible. Instead, he returned to the records, piecing together every missing patient across decades. The pattern became clear. Every surge of disappearances coincided with great storms, years apart. Each storm lasted 3 days. Each ended with silence. And they were only on day 2. At dawn, Harrow rushed into his quarters, face gray. "Another missing," he gasped. "One of the staff this time. Fletcher, the guard you questioned." His bed was empty. No sign of struggle. Pierce's jaw tightened. He had known it was coming. But worse awaited. When they checked Fletcher's quarters, the sheets were soaked with seawater. Across the wall above the bed, written in dripping salt, was a single phrase. "The gathering begins tonight." By evening, the asylum was in chaos. Doors rattled though locked, lanterns extinguished themselves, patients shrieked in unison as if cued by an unseen conductor. The storm outside reached its height, waves hammering the walls like fists. Pierce assembled Harrow and the remaining staff in the dining hall. "No one leaves alone. No one answers if they hear their name. Stay in groups and keep the doors barred." "What of you?" Harrow asked. Pierce checked the load of his revolver. "I'll be in the sublevels." Harrow seized his arm. "You'll be killed." "Maybe," Pierce said. His voice was iron. "But if I don't find what they're doing down there, we all will." With lantern and pistol, Detective Pierce descended once more into the depths. The iron door gaped open now, though he had ordered it sealed behind him the night before. The circles carved into its surface glowed faintly, pulsing like a heartbeat. The whispers surged as he crossed the threshold. Not many voices now, but one, vast and deep, rumbling through the stone itself. Pierce. The corridor sloped downward, leading him deeper beneath the fortress. Water dripped from the ceiling, forming shallow pools across the floor. Each pool reflected not his face, but others, pale, hollow-eyed, mouths open in endless scream. He pressed on, marking the walls with chalk. Soon the passage opened into a cavern, vast and echoing. At its center stood a great stone altar carved from the bedrock itself, blackened with centuries of salt. Around it lay the remnants of robes, bones arranged in circles, chains bolted into the floor. And upon the altar was Fletcher, alive. His body writhed against invisible bonds, back arching as if strings pulled him from above. His eyes rolled white, his mouth opening and closing to form words not his own. "Detective Pierce," Fletcher croaked in a voice not his own. "The gathering welcomes you." The lantern flame flickered. Shadows stretched across the cavern, converging toward the altar like grasping hands. Pierce raised his pistol. "Tell me what you want," he said. Fletcher's mouth split into a grotesque grin. "We want what we have always taken. Names. Flesh. Vessels. You are chosen detective. You will carry us beyond these walls." The stone beneath Pierce's boots trembled. Cracks split the altar, glowing faintly with a sickly green light. The air stank of brine and blood. He fired. The shot rang out like thunder. Fletcher's head snapped back, his body falling limp. For a moment, silence. Then the cavern roared with voices. 1,000 at once, shrieking from the walls, from the water, from the very air. "You cannot kill what is beneath. The gathering has begun." The altar split wide. Water surged upward, black and thick, filling the cavern with the stench of rot. And from the depths below, something vast began to rise. Detective Pierce tightened his grip on the pistol, jaw set. The storm above was nothing compared to the storm below. And he was walking straight into it. The cavern shook as if the sea itself were forcing its way through the rock. Water foamed black across the floor, swallowing Fletcher's lifeless body, dragging it down into the crack that split the altar. Detective Pierce backed to the cavern wall, pistol raised, though the weapon felt absurdly small. The voices that had filled the chamber now converged into one, low and resonant, vibrating the stone in his teeth. "Pierce." The lantern hissed and guttered, its flame dying, yet the cavern glowed with its own sickly light. From the widening fissure below, a shape began to rise. At first it seemed like smoke, twisting tendrils of black vapor that glistened wet as they curled upward. But then the tendrils thickened, solidified, dripping water and something darker. They coiled across the altar, slapping wetly against stone, pulling something vast behind them. A maw emerged. Not a mouth in any human sense, but a void lined with rows of jagged stone-like teeth, grinding against one another, as if eager to taste flesh. Around the maw, hundreds of pale eyes blinked open, each bloodless, each fixing on Pierce. His heart hammered once, then seemed to stop. He fired. The bullet sparked harmlessly against wet stone, vanishing into black water. The maw widened in something like laughter. "Names," the voice rumbled. "We rise by names. The list is not yet full. The storm has not yet ended." The water surged higher, reaching his boots. Pierce turned, chalking a mark desperately on the wall before forcing himself down a side passage. The cavern behind him echoed with sloshing water and the scrape of tendrils against stone. The maw was not following. Not yet. It was waiting. Pierce staggered back into the main corridor of the sublevels, lungs burning. The whispering walls pressed closer than ever, each voice distinct now, each murmuring names, names he recognized. Patience. Orderlies. Harrow. And his own. Every whisper ended with the same word. Vessel. He emerged into the asylum at dawn, drenched and hollow-eyed. The storm still raged outside, rain lashing against the barred windows. The staff who had obeyed his orders huddled in the dining hall, pale with fear. Harrow rushed to him. "What did you find?" Pierce laid Fletcher's badge on the table. Salt crusted its surface. Harrow stared. "God help us." "No," Pierce said flatly. "No God down there." The staff exchanged frightened glances. Some wept. Pierce's voice cut through them like steel. "Listen to me. They're calling names. They'll take more before the storm ends. If you hear your name, you cover your ears, you run, you cling to the living. Do not answer. Do not follow. But where are they taken? An orderly whispered. Pierce's jaw tightened. The maw takes them. And it isn't full yet. The asylum unraveled through the day. 3 patients vanished, their locked doors found standing open, seawater pooled across their floors. A nurse vanished from the infirmary, her lantern left burning, her bed soaked. Pierce hunted each scene, searching for patterns, clues. Always he found the same, concentric circles scrawled across walls and floors, drawn in brine, etched deep as if by claws. Always he heard the whispers behind him. And always, at the edge of hearing, his own name. He returned to Margaret Lowe, the patient who seemed to know more than any. She sat rocking, humming tunelessly, her eyes bloodshot. "They've taken more," Pierce said. She stopped humming. "They will take until the count is done." "What count?" She raised trembling hands, spreading her fingers. 10 times 10. 100 names to feed them all. 100 vessels to hollow. Then the sea opens, and it walks free. Pierce knelt, gripping her arms. "How do you know this?" Her lips twisted in a smile that was not her own. "Because I was chosen once. But I ran. They don't forgive that." Her head jerked violently. For an instant her eyes rolled white, her mouth opening in a voice not hers. "Pierce." He released her, stepping back, pistol drawn. But the voice was gone. She slumped forward, shuddering. "They've written your name, detective," she whispered. "You are already hollow." By nightfall, Harrow begged him to seal the sublevels again. "It won't matter," Pierce said. "It isn't walls that hold them. It's the storm. When it ends, either they are fed enough to sleep, or they rise. That's the choice. Then we're damned either way." Pierce checked the cylinder of his revolver, each brass cartridge gleaming. "Not if I choose the count. Not if I end it on my terms." Harrow's voice shook. "What are you planning?" "Names," Pierce said. "If it's names they want, I'll give them mine." He descended alone that night, lantern and pistol steady in his grip. The iron door glowed faintly still, its circles pulsing like veins. Beyond, the corridor sloped downward, water lapping higher now, reaching his knees. The whispers grew into a roar as he approached the cavern. And the maw was waiting. It filled the altar now, its tendrils spread across the floor like roots. Its eyes opened one by one, hundreds, each fixing on him. The maw widened, teeth grinding, the sound like stone against stone. Pierce stepped forward, voice steady. "You have my name. So take me." The cavern thundered with laughter. "Not yet," the maw rumbled. "The count is not full. You are the last. The vessel of the vessel. You will carry us beyond these walls. You will walk where we cannot." The tendrils lashed, striking the stone at his feet. Salt water hissed, burning the floor like acid. Pierce lifted the pistol. "You'll take nothing." He fired once, twice, thrice, bullets ripping through eyes, through tendrils, though each wound sealed instantly with black water. The maw shuddered but did not fall. Names cannot kill. Names cannot end. Names only open. The cavern trembled violently. Water surged upward, dragging him against the altar steps. He fought, clawing for purchase, lantern sputtering. The maw's tendrils wrapped the stone above him, pulling the ceiling wider, opening to something beyond, a vast expanse of black sea, endless, roaring. And for the first time, Pierce understood, the asylum was not the prison. It was the door. The lantern died. Darkness crushed in, broken only by the hundreds of eyes, gleaming like drowned stars. Pierce's hand found chalk in his pocket. Desperate, he scrawled across the altar itself, carving through salt and slime. Circles, lines, words he had seen before. Vessel. Seal. Hollow. The cavern screamed. The maw convulsed, tendrils recoiling, teeth grinding so hard sparks showered across the stone. The water surged higher still, but the chalk burned where it touched the altar, glowing white-hot. The maw roared, and the cavern collapsed. Pierce awoke in darkness. Stone pressed above him, water dripping on his face. He coughed, dragging himself upright. The cavern was gone. No altar, no maw. Only rubble, sealed tight. He staggered back the corridor, following faint chalk marks until at last he emerged into the asylum stairwell. His lantern was gone, his pistol half shattered. Salt crusted every seam of his coat. The storm outside still raged. The asylum still moaned with whispers. But the maw was silent. For now. He returned to Harrow's office, collapsing into a chair. Harrow's face was gray with exhaustion. Well? Pierce lit a cigarette with shaking hands. Sealed. Buried. But not gone. Then we're safe? Pierce exhaled smoke, staring out the rain-lashed window. Safe until the storm comes again. Harrow swallowed hard. And it will? Yes, Pierce said. His eyes were steel. It always does. The storm raged for 3 more days before it broke. When dawn finally revealed the sea, it stretched calm and silver to the horizon, its violence erased as though it had never been. But inside the asylum, the damage lingered. The walls were cracked. Salt stained every floor. Doors warped from water pressure no longer closed. Entire wings reeked of mildew and rot. Worse than the ruin were the absences. 19 patients gone. 4 staff. All vanished without trace, their names carved into the ledger Pierce had taken from the curator thing. The ledger he now kept locked in his case, though at night he swore he heard it rustle. The asylum had survived the storm. But something within it had not ended. Detective Pierce remained longer than he should have, though Harrow begged him to leave with the first boat. You're no warden, Harrow said, his hands trembling as he poured bitter coffee. You've done your part. Whatever remains, it's our burden. Pierce ignored him, scanning a crude map of the asylum he had sketched. If you want to survive the next storm, you'll need more than prayers and routine. The maw was sealed, but not destroyed. And if Margaret Lowe was right, the count isn't finished. Harrow grimaced. And how do you propose to stop it, detective? With chalk and a revolver? We've lost too many already. Pierce's eyes did not lift from the map. I'll find a way. The asylum returned to its routines, at least on the surface. Meals were served, shifts rotated, medicine distributed. But everything was slower, quieter. Patients watched the ceilings, flinching at every drip. Orderlies carried lanterns even in daylight. Whispers traveled faster than the food carts. The hollow had names. The hollow would rise again. The detective had sealed it with a mark. The detective was marked himself. Pierce ignored the rumors, but he saw the fear behind every glance. They avoided him now, even Harrow. Only Margaret Lowe still met his eyes, smiling her cracked smile. You feel it too, she whispered one evening as he passed her cell. The silence is only waiting. That night he dreamt. He was back in the cavern, water rising around him. The maw gaped, its teeth grinding, its eyes endless. But this time the altar bore not circles but words scrawled in chalk. Pierce. 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 The name repeated, covering every surface, glowing white. The maw's voice thundered, the vessel of the vessel. Walk for us. Carry us. He woke choking, salt on his tongue. The ledger lay open on the desk, though he had locked it in his case. His name was written across a fresh page, ink still glistening. The days that followed blurred. He wrote reports no one would read. He mapped corridors that shifted when no one looked. He marked fresh symbols that appeared overnight on the walls, spirals, circles, names. Then the disappearances began again. A patient gone from a locked dormitory. A guard vanished on his rounds. A nurse taken while fetching blankets. Each time, the same. Seawater pooled where they had stood, and the ledger filled another name. Pierce felt the asylum closing on him, walls groaning like ribs. At night he heard the voices not from below, but within the plaster itself, whispering through cracks. Vessel. Hollow. Pierce. He scrawled countermarks, but the chalk crumbled in his hands, useless. On the 6th night after the storm broke, Harrow came to him pale and shaking. "It's begun again," the doctor whispered. "We can't stop it. The names, they're not just ours anymore. They're from the mainland. My sister. My father. I saw them written in the ward. How is that possible?" Pierce lit a cigarette, his hands steady though his stomach turned. "It isn't the asylum alone. The hollow spreads through memory. Through names spoken and written. If it has yours, it has you, no matter the walls. Then we're all damned." "Not yet." Pierce exhaled smoke. "If it feeds on names, then there's one thing it cannot endure." Harrow's eyes darted. "What?" Pierce's gaze was iron. "Oblivion." He tested his theory the next day. With Harrow's reluctant help, he sought the oldest patient records, handwritten ledgers from decades before. He chose one name at random, a man long dead, buried years ago. He burned the page. The fire caught, ink curling into ash. The whisper in the wall faltered, stuttered, fell silent. For one heartbeat, the asylum was still. Then came the scream. It erupted through the halls, shattering windows, rattling every door. Patients shrieked, covering their ears. Harrow fell to his knees, blood running from his nose. Pierce alone stood steady, though the sound tore at his skull. When it ended, the ledger on his desk was blank on one page. A name erased. Proof. But the price was steep. That night 3 more were taken, their names scrawled darker than ever in the book. The hollow did not forgive. Pierce stared at the ledger long into the night, cigarette ash falling across its cover. He understood now. Names bound them, but names could also unbind. If he could erase enough, he might starve them all. But it would fight back harder each time. And it wanted his name most of all. He closed the book, tucking it beneath his arm. His path was clear. If the hollow was memory, then Detective Pierce would become its forgetting. Detective Pierce did not sleep for 3 nights after the experiment. The scream that had followed the burning name still echoed in the halls, a constant undertone beneath every creak and whisper. Staff spoke in hushed voices, terrified of waking the sound again. Patients refused food, staring only at the walls, as if waiting for them to split. But Pierce had proof. Names bound the hollow. And names could be undone. Harrow met him in the infirmary, the room half ruined by salt damage. He looked worse than Pierce had ever seen him. Hair unwashed, hands trembling, eyes ringed and black. "You tamper with forces you don't understand," Harrow muttered, dabbing iodine on his wrist where glass had cut him during the scream. "Do you realize what you've done? You've poked the wound of the world itself." Pierce lit a cigarette, ignoring the doctor's quaver. "And found it bleeds." Harrow slammed the table, rattling the jars. "It retaliated. 3 more souls gone, because you dared erase one. What happens if you burn 10? Or 100? Pierce's voice was steady. "Then maybe the rest of us live." Harrow sagged, defeated. You'll kill us all. Not if I move faster than it does. The ledger became his weapon. He carried it everywhere now, though it grew heavier each day. Its cover seemed to pulse faintly at times, the letters almost breathing. He began small. The name of a nurse long dead. Then a patient buried in the cemetery behind the asylum. Each time he erased a name, the same thing occurred, a scream, a shudder, a violent backlash that cost them more of the living. But he kept records. He counted. For every 3 the Hollow took, 1 erased was never replaced. A slow war of attrition. It was losing patience. On the 5th day of erasures, Pierce walked the western ward, the ledger tucked beneath his arm. The ward was abandoned now, its windows shattered by the storm, salt air curling paint from the walls. The whispers were louder here. Pierce. Vessel. Memory. Forgetting. He stopped before a mirror cracked into spiderweb fractures. His reflection stared back, gaunt, pale, hollow-eyed. But not alone. Behind him stood a figure. Tall, featureless, its body a distortion of air and shadow. It had no face, yet he knew it was staring. He turned, revolver raised. Nothing. But in the mirror, it remained. Watching. Waiting. When he touched the glass, it was warm. That night the patients rioted. No one knew why it began, only that screams erupted in the eastern dormitory and spread like wildfire. Men and women clawed at walls, beat at doors, tore at one another, as though madness itself had bloomed all at once. Pierce fought through the chaos, Harrow at his side, shouting orders useless against the frenzy. Blood slicked the floors. Teeth broke. Bones cracked. And through it all the whispers thundered, erase. 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 Pierce fled to his quarters, seized the ledger, and tore 3 names free in one motion. The riot stopped. Every patient collapsed where they stood, unconscious. Every lamp went out. And the ledger shook in his hands, its pages bleeding ink until it poured onto the floor, pooling black. When he dared look again, 20 names were gone. Harrow found him at dawn, still sitting amid the ink-stained floorboards. You see? The doctor hissed. You tamper, and the rules change. You don't control it. It controls you. Pierce's cigarette smoldered. If I can unmake its memory, I can starve it. It wants me to stop. That means I'm close. Or it means you're feeding it faster than it could dream. Pierce met his gaze. Then I'll choke it on me. The mirror figure returned that night. Pierce dreamt of corridors without end, walls carved from pages, ceilings dripping with ink. The figure walked before him, leading him deeper. He tried to follow, but his feet sank into the pages as though into wet soil. When he woke, the ledger lay open across his chest. A new page. A single word written across it in sprawling black script. Oblivion. He studied the word for hours, tracing each letter with his finger. It did not fade like the others. It did not bleed. Oblivion. The absence of memory. The end of names. Was it a command? A threat? Or a weapon? 2 nights later, the sea returned. Not with storm or wave, but with silence. Every window filled with the shimmer of water, as though the asylum were sinking, though the floors remained dry. Fish swam past glass panes. Shadows drifted with fins and tails, larger than whales. Patients pressed their faces to the windows, entranced. Harrow wept, muttering prayers. Pierce stood unmoving, ledger clutched to his chest. He understood then. The hollow was no creature. No beast chained beneath. It was tide. It was hunger vast as the sea. And he was already inside its mouth. He returned to his room, closed the door, lit a candle. The ledger opened by itself, pages riffling until it stopped at the word again. Oblivion. Pierce took his revolver from the desk, laid it beside the book. If the hollow fed on names, then one way remained to starve it. He could erase his own. But the question lingered, would that save the others? Or would it only feed the silence more? The candle sputtered. Ink crawled across the walls, forming circles, then spirals, then letters. Pierce. 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 He touched the gun. Then the page. And chose neither. Not yet. Instead, he whispered, "If you want my name, come earn it." The walls trembled, and the ledger slammed shut. For 2 days after the word oblivion appeared, Detective Pierce waited. He did not sleep, did not speak, barely ate. He patrolled the corridors, smoking endlessly, watching for any sign of what the hollow would send next. The staff whispered that he was unraveling, that the ledger had eaten into his mind. Perhaps it had. But Pierce knew the truth. The asylum was holding its breath. Something was coming. On the third night it broke. The western wing door burst open with such force the hinges ripped from stone. Salt water gushed into the corridor, foaming and black, carrying beds, broken chairs, and scraps of uniforms. Lights shattered. Alarms failed. Patients screamed as the flood roared toward them. But the water was wrong. It did not rise in level, did not soak the floors. It climbed the walls, defying gravity, lashing upward until the ceiling itself dripped. From those dripping pools emerged hands, pale and skeletal, dragging themselves down into the ward. Not drowned. Not living. Something in between. Pierce fired twice, bullets cracking skulls that dissolved like wet paper. The creatures collapsed into ink, flowing back toward the waterline that pulsed across the ceiling. More hands followed. He dragged Harrow into an office, barricading the door with filing cabinets. Ink oozed beneath the cracks, tendrils curling toward their boots. "It's breaching," Harrow gasped, clutching his rosary tight enough to draw blood. "The walls can't hold it anymore." "The hollow isn't breaching," Pierce snapped. "It's opening the way." He yanked the ledger from his coat and flung it on the desk. The book trembled, as if it too were afraid. Harrow stared at it like a viper. "You'll damn us all if you use it again." Pierce struck a match, holding the flame inches from the page. "And we'll drown if I don't." This time he didn't choose a name. He scrawled his own handwriting across the blank margin of the page, the essay, and set it alight. The scream that followed was unlike the others. It was not sharp, not immediate. It was deep, endless. The scream of something older than language, older than memory itself. The flood shuddered, retreating. The hands withdrew. The walls quaked as if in terror. When the smoke cleared, the word was gone. But so were 15 patients. Harrow collapsed to his knees. "You've declared war on an ocean." Pierce exhaled smoke. "Then I'll bleed it dry." The asylum did not return to calm. Every mirror showed distortions now, shadows stretching, eyes blinking where none should be. Windows warped into liquid glass, showing glimpses of drowned cities, towers tilting beneath tides. Patients muttered prayers in languages long dead. Nurses tied charms of salt and twine to their uniforms, though none worked. And always the whispers, Pierce. Oblivion. Vessel. He carried the ledger like a loaded gun, flipping through its pages in search of another crack, another weakness. But every new attempt carried heavier cost. He was losing more than patience. He was losing time. On the 7th night, the asylum fell silent. Too silent. No footsteps. No screams. No breathing. Pierce walked the halls alone, revolver in one hand, ledger in the other. His shadow stretched too long, bending at angles his body did not. The silence thickened until it was not absence, but presence. Then came the voice. Not a whisper. A voice. You carry my wound. You bleed my hunger. Why fight what you are becoming? Pierce stopped in the atrium, staring into the dark. You want me to be your vessel. Why? What makes me different? The voice rolled like thunder under waves. Because you forget. Because you erase. You are my mirror, detective. Your hand writes the end. The ledger's pages fluttered open, stopping again at the word, oblivion. The voice purred. Say it. Become it. Pierce raised his gun, pointing it at the book. I'd rather shoot out the memory of both of us. The shadows rippled and laughed. That was when the breach came in earnest. The ceiling split, not with cracks but with horizon. Black water poured upward, dragging the stars with it, until the atrium was open to a sky that was not the sky. Waves roared above them, inverted oceans curling over the asylum like a lid. From it descended shapes, not men, not beasts, but silhouettes of memory. Forgotten lovers. Erased children. Faces half seen and half lost. They swarmed the halls, whispering in broken syllables. Pierce fired, but bullets passed through them. He slashed pages from the ledger, burning words, tearing lines. Each act banished some, but the cost was immediate. Staff convulsed, patients vanished, rooms emptied. The hollow fed as it fought. By dawn, only he and Harrow remained breathing. The doctor clung to a crucifix carved from splintered chair wood, rocking back and forth. You've doomed us, Harrow rasped. There's no asylum anymore. Just its mouth. Pierce sat against the wall, ledger open on his knees. He stared at the last blank page. Only one remained. One page to end it. Harrow looked at him with desperate eyes. If you write its name, maybe it binds. Maybe it stops. Pierce flicked ash onto the floor. And if I write mine, maybe it follows me alone. Don't, Harrow begged. If you offer yourself, it won't stop. It will only grow. Pierce closed the ledger. Then the trick is to make it choke. That night, he carried the ledger to the asylum chapel. The stained glass had warped into rippling water, saints weeping salt. Candles guttered in unseen wind. He laid the book on the altar, lit a final cigarette, and began to write. Not a name, not a single word, but every word he remembered. Every case, every victim, every scream, every lie, every truth. He filled the page with his memory, pouring himself into the paper until his hand bled and the pen tore through parchment. When the final line scrawled, the ledger slammed shut on its own. The chapel thundered with silence, and the ocean fell still. But outside, the asylum groaned. Its walls bowed inward, foundations sinking as if dragged beneath waves unseen. Windows shattered not from force, but from vacuum. Harrow burst into the chapel. What have you done? Pierce pocketed the ledger, his face unreadable. Given it everything it ever wanted. The floor split beneath them. Water surged upward. But it stopped at Pierce's boots. Around him, a circle of dryness. The hollow whispered in the walls. You are mine. Pierce lit another match. Not yet. And dropped it into the ledger. The book erupted in black fire, consuming itself in a cyclone of ash and memory. The asylum screamed, stone cracking, timbers splintering. The ocean above collapsed inward, crushing roof and tower alike. Pierce and Harrow were hurled into the flood. When Pierce surfaced, the asylum was gone. Nothing remained but a flat horizon of salt water, stretching endless. Harrow floated nearby, clinging to a board. His eyes were wild. We killed it, Tell me we killed it! Pierce spat brine. No. Then what? He lit a cigarette with a match somehow still dry. We starved it. And beneath them, the water trembled, waiting. The sea did not drown him. It carried him. For hours, or days, time had no meaning in that place. Detective Pierce drifted across a horizon without sun or stars, only dim light filtering through the rolling black waves. Harrow clung to his splintered plank in silence, lips moving in prayer. Pierce smoked until his matches were gone, staring at the ledger's ashes smeared across his hands. He had destroyed it, yet its weight lingered as though he still carried it. Memory is never so easily burned. At last land appeared. A shore of pale stone stretched before them, endless and smooth as bone. No sand. No gulls. No tide. Just a dead stillness that rejected life. The current dragged them onto it, then receded with unnatural swiftness, leaving them sprawled and coughing on the cold surface. Pierce stood first, boots crunching not on sand but brittle fragments. He knelt, sifting them through his fingers. Not shells. Not rock. Teeth. Harrow gagged. This isn't land. It's shoreline of what's left, Pierce muttered, scanning the horizon. Memory stripped to the root. They walked inland. The stones stretched flat, broken only by scattered ruins. Not buildings in any true sense, but impressions of them, outlines, shadows frozen in stone. Doorways that led nowhere. Windows framing only blank sky. Every ruin whispered. Faint echoes, fragments of conversations, names spoken without context. Pierce brushed his hand against one wall, and felt a shock of recognition. His mother's voice, calling him from a doorway long gone. He pulled away sharply. Harrow saw the look on his face and shook his head. We're in its belly now, detective. This is where it feeds. Then we keep walking, Pierce said. Toward what? Pierce lit another cigarette. Toward its heart. The ruins grew thicker, rising into a broken city of memory. Streets twisted into circles. Signs bore no letters, only smears of half-formed names. Towers tilted at impossible angles, their windows filled with watching eyes that vanished when seen directly. The silence pressed heavier here. No wind, no insects, no footsteps but their own. And beneath it, the faintest murmur, like water running through stone. Harrow clutched his crucifix tighter. This is wrong. We should have drowned. This is purgatory. Pierce blew smoke into the air. Purgatory needs absolution. This doesn't. They found the first survivor at dusk. She sat on the steps of a collapsed church, head bowed, hands folded in her lap. At first Pierce thought her stone like the rest, but when he approached, she lifted her face. Her eyes were hollow sockets. Yet she smiled. You walked far, she whispered. Most lie down and forget themselves. Harrow recoiled. What are you? Forgotten, she said simply. I had a name once. Then the hollow took it. I am what remains. Pierce studied her. How long have you been here? She tilted her head, listening to some inner sound. Since before your wars. Since before your father's fathers. Her smile widened, cracks splitting her skin. But you carry the mark. The maw knows you. Pierce's jaw tightened. Where does this road end? She raised a trembling hand, pointing toward the horizon. There, faint against the dim sky, rose a tower. Not stone, not wood, but pages. Endless pages bound together, fluttering though no wind stirred. The archive, she whispered. All names kept. All names erased. If you seek its heart, you'll find it there. They left her behind, though Harrow begged otherwise. She's human, he cried. She's husk, Pierce said flatly. Stay near her long enough, you'll be husk too. He didn't look back. The walk to the tower took what felt like days. The city shifted as they moved, streets bending, doors opening onto new avenues that hadn't existed moments before. Once they turned a corner and found themselves back at the shoreline of Teeth. Another time, they opened a door and stepped into a hallway from the asylum, complete with flickering lamps and water stains. But always the tower grew nearer. At night, they did not sleep. The ground whispered too loudly. Names crawled into their ears, voices begging, accusing, promising. Harrow stuffed his ears with cloth, weeping silently. Pierce smoked until the packs were gone, staring into the dark. On the third day, they reached the base. The archive was colossal. Its foundation stretched miles wide, its surface not smooth but layered with books, journals, ledgers, scraps of parchment pressed into a monolith. Pages fluttered, ink dripping like sap. Voices murmured from every seam. At the entrance stood a figure. A man in a curator's uniform, though no face remained, only a hollow mask of paper. In his hands he carried another ledger, blank and waiting. When he saw them, he bowed. "The vessel has come." Harrow clutched Pierce's sleeve. "Don't listen." But Pierce stepped forward. "What's inside?" he demanded. The curator spread his arms. "All that is. All that was. All that will be. To enter is to be written. To be written is to remain. Forever. And if I burn it?" The curator tilted his head. Pages rustled. "Then you unmake yourself with it. But you would not. You came because you seek your own name. And the hollow waits for that." Pierce said nothing. But his hand strayed to his coat pocket, where the ashes of the ledger still clung. They entered. The archive's halls were endless, filled with shelves that rose into the clouds. Every book whispered, every page sighed. Dust hung in the air like memory itself, thick and suffocating. Harrow staggered beneath the weight of it. We can't be here." "Then leave," Pierce said, voice steady. "I've got business." But Harrow clung to him. "You'll be devoured." "Maybe." Pierce lit the last match, inhaling the final drag of smoke. "Or maybe I'll choke it first." He stepped deeper into the archive. And the books began to call his name. The books knew him. Each step Detective Pierce took into the archive brought whispers. At first faint, like a breeze through reeds. Then sharper, louder, until every shelf muttered in chorus. Pierce. The name curled around him like smoke, seeping into his skin. He clenched his jaw, refusing to look at the pages shifting in their bindings. Harrow stumbled behind him, pale, sweating. His eyes darted at the shelves. "Don't look," Pierce warned. I can hear them," Harrow gasped. "My mother's voice. She's calling me." "Then keep walking." The shelves leaned closer. Paper trembled, ink bled. Letters slithered across pages, reshaping into eyes. Thousands of them, staring. Pierce struck a match, holding the small flame high. "Your words. Nothing more." The shelves hissed, and the eyes blinked shut. For a time, they reached the first intersection. The archive stretched in 4 directions, each passage identical, shelves rising forever, books whispering endlessly. The air carried no draft, no hint of guidance. Pierce closed his eyes. He waited. The whispers swelled, arguing, pleading, condemning, until one voice rose above them all, clear and sharp as glass. "Detective." His eyes snapped open. The voice had come from the left. Harrow tugged his sleeve. "No. Please. Don't follow it." But Pierce turned left. The path narrowed as they walked, shelves tilting overhead like jaws. The air thickened, heavy with ink and dust. Harrow coughed, pressing a cloth over his face. At last, they came upon a table. It stood in the center of the passage, carved from dark wood, though no tool marks scarred its surface. Upon it lay an open book. Not dusty, not ancient. Fresh. The ink still glistened. Pierce stepped forward, reading. It was his life. Not the dry record of birth and census, but memory. His first case. His first kill. His first lie to save a witness. His first failure to save one. Harrow peered over his shoulder. That's impossible. Pierce snapped the book shut. No more impossible than the rest of this. But when he tried to move on, the book trembled, forcing itself open again. A new page had appeared. Blank. Waiting. The pen beside it twitched, eager. Harrow whispered, horrified. It wants you to finish it. Pierce ground the match between his fingers. I don't write on command. He reached for the book, and it screamed. The sound was not from paper but from everywhere at once, rattling the shelves, shaking the ground. Books burst from bindings, pages fluttering like wings, filling the air in a storm of ink and parchment. The shelves shifted, closing in, towering over them. The archive itself was moving. Pierce grabbed Harrow, dragging him through the storm. Pages slashed like knives, cutting shallow wounds across his face, his hands. Harrow shrieked, stumbling blind, but Pierce hauled him forward. At last they burst into a wider chamber. A rotunda. The chamber rose higher than sight, its walls lined with books bound not in leather, not in cloth, but in flesh. Human flesh stitched with crude care, marked with tattoos, scars, brands. Pierce did not flinch. At the center stood a pedestal. Upon it lay a single book larger than any man could lift. Its cover was black, its edges rimed with frost. The title was etched in letters that shifted too fast to read, though one word always returned. Hollow. Harrow collapsed to his knees. We shouldn't. Pierce stepped closer. This is it. The pedestal shuddered. The book's cover lifted an inch, releasing a breath colder than any winter. Frost spread across the floor, and a voice filled the chamber. Not whisper, not scream. A chorus of every tongue Pierce had ever heard, woven into one. Vessel. The book opened itself. Pages turned, faster than wind, each one filled with names. Names scratched out, names erased, names burning like embers. Pierce scanned them, his pulse hammering, until he found 3. His own, Harrow's, and a third, newly written. Unknown. Pierce froze. The name was familiar, though he had never seen it before. It felt heavy, like a stone in his chest. The book pulsed. The vessel breaks. The hollow feeds. Harrow clutched his head, screaming. His eyes bled, his voice cracking. Stop it! Make it stop! Pierce slammed the book shut. The chamber shook. Shelves toppled, flesh bindings split. From the seams poured shadow, thick and writhing, clawing at the air. The hollow itself was rising. Pierce drew his revolver. A futile gesture, he knew. But it steadied his hands. The shadows formed shapes. Not beasts, not men. Half-formed, ever-changing. Mouths where eyes should be. Hands where ribs should be. Each one whispering his name. Harrow scrambled back. We're dead. We're already dead. No, Pierce said. His voice was steel. Not yet. He drew a match, the last one, and struck it. The tiny flame flared in the dark. The shadows recoiled. The book hissed, frost sizzling at its edges. Pierce raised the flame high. You want me written? You'll choke on ash first. And he pressed a match to the book. The scream that followed was not sound. It was pressure, weight. Silence turned violent. Harrow collapsed, hands over his ears though there was nothing to block. The shelves convulsed, pages igniting in chain reaction. Fire spread, bright and hungry, though no smoke rose. The hollow shrieked, its shadows writhing, clawing at Pierce, yet unable to touch him. He stood unflinching as the fire consumed the chamber. The book thrashed on the pedestal, snapping shut, opening again, trying to resist. But the flame held, burning deeper, until its black cover split, releasing a blast of light so fierce it blinded. Pierce closed his eyes and listened. Beneath the chaos, beneath the fury, one phrase repeated, steady as a heartbeat. The vessel remains. Then silence. When Pierce opened his eyes, the chamber was gone. He stood once more on the shore of Teeth, Harrow beside him, trembling. No tower, no shelves, no book. Only the endless sea. But in his coat pocket, he felt weight. A fragment. A charred piece of page, edges smoldering still. He did not pull it out. Not yet. Harrow whispered, broken. Did we win? Pierce lit another cigarette with shaking hands, though no matches remained. The ember glowed anyway. He exhaled smoke into the dead air. No, he said. Not yet. Detective Pierce did not move at first. The endless sea of teeth had vanished. Harrow leaned against him, shaking. The air smelled faintly of smoke, ash, and old paper. In the distance, the horizon glimmered, indifferent, silent. Pierce reached into his coat pocket. The fragment of the charred page weighed heavier than it should. He turned it over in his fingers. Black letters shimmered faintly on the brittle surface, almost alive. Words scuttled just beyond comprehension. The vessel remains. A shiver ran down his spine. Not fear. Awareness. The hollow had not been destroyed. Only delayed. Harrow looked up at him, eyes wide. What do we do now? Pierce exhaled slowly, smoke curling from his cigarette, though he had no match, no lighter. The ember glowed anyway, a tiny defiance against the dark. We survive, he said. We contain it, as best we can. Harrow swallowed. But how? That thing, the archive, the shadows, the voices, it's not just in that building. It's everywhere. It follows us. Pierce's jaw tightened. He stared at the fragment again. The ink pulsed like a heartbeat. Slowly, deliberately, he pressed the page flat on his palm. You're right, he admitted. We're not done. But we fight with what we have. Knowledge. Strategy. Willpower. The hollow had taught him something vital. It could not exist without attention, without acknowledgement, without the vessel. And he would not allow the vessel to be consumed lightly. Harrow's hands trembled. Detective, we can't keep running forever. Pierce shook his head. We won't. We adapt. We prepare. Every fragment we recover, every page we burn, that's leverage. That's survival. He stood and tossed the fragment into the wind. It fluttered, almost resisting, then fell ash-like onto the sand. Harrow bent down to touch it, hesitating. Pierce stopped him. Not yet. Let it settle. Let it teach us something first. They began walking inland. The night sky stretched overhead, dark and vast. Stars glittered coldly, uncaring. The hollow never sleeps, Harrow murmured. Pierce glanced back at the black horizon. Neither do we. The days that followed blurred into a rhythm of investigation and preparation. Ashford Asylum had been only one node in a web of ancient sites, each connected to the hollow in some way. Newspapers whispered of disappearances, libraries hinted at impossible manuscripts, and local lore held warnings in half-forgotten tongues. Pierce scoured archives, tracked leads, and catalogued fragments. Harrow, still shaken but resolute, followed him tirelessly. Each recovered piece taught them more: symbols, words, names, rituals. But each fragment also carried a price. Shadows lingered longer at night. Whispers haunted the edges of their perception. Dreams turned into memory traps, sometimes revealing events that had not yet occurred. Yet Pierce persisted. He knew one truth above all: the hollow required vigilance, or else it would consume everything. One evening, in the dim glow of a single lamp, Pierce examined a collection of pages laid out like a map. Harrow had nearly collapsed, exhausted, when Pierce's hand froze over a single word. Detective. Not a whisper, not a dream. The word had appeared on a clean sheet, no ink previously visible. Slowly, deliberately, it glimmered in response to his touch. Pierce's heart sank. The hollow was testing him, drawing him deeper. "We're not ready to fight it directly," he said. "Not yet. But we can build defenses." He pulled a small notebook from his pocket, old, worn, filled with sketches of symbols, wards, and sequences of flame and salt. "Containment," he muttered. "We have to contain, not destroy. That's the only way to survive." Harrow looked at him, hope and terror mixing in his expression. "And if it finds another vessel?" Pierce tapped the notebook. "Then we stop it before it knows what to feed on." Weeks passed. The fragments accumulated. Each one brought new understanding, new horror. The hollow's influence was everywhere. Objects moved slightly out of place. People whispered in tongues they had never learned. Reflections flickered with shadows that were not their own. Pierce and Harrow became shadows themselves, moving through the city with caution, awareness heightened. Nights were sleepless, the hollow's presence nearly tangible. Yet Pierce maintained his focus, using every scrap of knowledge to predict its movements. And then, one morning, the first real warning arrived. A package. No return address. No markings except one symbol, freshly drawn, a circle of ink and frost, the same mark that had bound the charred book in Ashford. Inside was a single sheet of paper. It read simply, "You cannot contain me forever." Pierce felt the weight of it instantly. The hollow had reached beyond Ashford, beyond containment, beyond their preparation. Yet he did not panic. He never panicked. Pierce and Harrow convened in a hidden room, walls lined with books, words drawn in chalk, and talismans hung carefully. The fire from a small brazier danced across the symbols, making them shimmer. Pierce traced a circle with his fingers. "We need a strategy that doesn't rely on distance or fire. The hollow learns too fast. We must trick it, mislead it, fragment it, give it false vessels, false threads, until it tires." Harrow nodded. "But every trick, every delay, gives it more opportunity to grow." "Yes," Pierce admitted. "But we don't have a choice. The alternative is letting it feed unchecked. And that, we cannot allow." He took a deep breath. "We'll strike from shadows. We'll gather knowledge, and we'll fight its influence wherever it touches." Ashford was only the beginning. Every fragment, every warning, they are all pieces of the same game. And we will play it to win. Night fell. The city outside was quiet, but the air thrummed with hidden movement. Pierce lit a candle, the flame steady. He stared at the shadows, sensing them at the edges of the room, but daring them to approach. "The hollow never sleeps," he whispered to the darkness. "Neither do we," Harrow echoed, his voice firm now, tempered by weeks of terror and endurance. And in the silence that followed, Pierce felt the weight of the world's horrors, and a resolve to face them. The Hollow was patient. So was he. The war had only just begun.